The setup is significantly in the family of origin. It can, the particular components of the family of origin. It can be in the playground as well. I mean, people who've experienced extended bullying, rather as Charles did, can create a sense that I'm not okay. And narcissistic wounding or narcissistic damage leaves one with a sense of self that's experienced as both painful and malevolent. Painful because of shame, and shame is a horrific experience. Shame is the sense that I'm not okay, I'm not good enough. I've heard it explained or expressed by a rabbi as I'm a schmuck. A Catholic priest, I'm intrinsically disordered, which of course is Catholic doctrine around same-sex interest, intrinsically disordered. I told him that Goethe says, if it's in nature, it's natural. And he wept. And I did tell him it's probably his biggest gift. So it can happen in the particular configuration of the family. It can also happen if you are belong to a stigmatized minority. So it can happen if you're gay, because gay people don't grow up in gay families. In fact, they're very isolated. And so it can emerge from that. And I very rarely met a gay man, less so women, who are not self-hating. There's an internalized self-directed homophobia, which is cruel and difficult. This is tackled by a book called The Velvet Rage by somebody called Downs, Alan Downs, I think he's called. And also there's an organization called The Quest Awaits You, which is designed to help gay men build up a strong sense of self. It can also be caused by circumstances beyond one's control. I had a patient who, this was years ago, who had been taught by his mother to sew up wounds because they were living in India or Pakistan during the Pakistan-Indian War, and there were bombs going off all around. But he was quite traumatized by this, probably traumatized by the effects of the war around him as well. So it doesn't have to come specifically or only from the domestic unit. It can come from other things. Somebody else was abandoned by his parents. Well, he wasn't abandoned by his parents. They didn't have any money. And so they had to go out to work, and they locked him in the flat all day. What else could they do? And then they sent him back to the country from which he came. This is not anything anybody does intentionally to harm. And whenever I do the history, I make the point that it's not about seeking to blame anybody. It's just trying to understand the etiology. And that results in a sense of self which is impoverished, fragile, weak, even malign. And then, of course, after that, people learn management techniques. I mean, my management technique is if I write books, then I'm acceptable. If I have enough degrees, I'm acceptable. I've always, if I have enough books, I'm acceptable. And I'm aware that the provision of books was set up when I was 3 years old. I was taken to the library and I got a book out called The Golden Treasury. So you can see how these things are formed. So the management techniques, for some people, it can be if I pull women, then I'm desirable. It can be if I make money, I'm acceptable. And then, of course, there are escape mechanisms, and internet pornography is an escape mechanism. The people tend to come when there's a crisis. Frequently enough, the wife is found out and is horrified and shocked, and they come to protect their relationship, because men have the capacity to compartmentalize. Women don't compartmentalize. They see everything as a whole, everything connected. But men put it in a box over there, a sex worker, so what, doesn't mean anything. It was half an hour. But the wife wouldn't respond to it like that. So, and I find in the groups that we run, these men dearly love their wives, even the difficult wives. was it Pascal who said something like, the heart has reasons that reason knows not. And sometimes the crisis is caused by losing employment or being seen at work, accessing internet pornography. Sometimes it can simply be an accumulation. I can't go on like this. And we find that many of our patients often come what you could describe as midlife, between about 35 and 45, when they're really asking themselves, do I want the rest of my life to be like the last part of my life? And the answer to that is probably no. So that would be the thing that brings people here. Occasionally we have people in the forensic section who come because of an arrest of some kind or another, something like that, which is very, very disturbing, very traumatic indeed. The definition that I use, or the criteria that I use to try to establish compulsive sexual behavior, I always preface it by saying it's only a problem if it's a problem. You know, you can use sex workers, not a problem for you, not a problem for anybody. It's an exchange of goods and services. And that's not a problem. But if it's a problem to you, then that's different. There are 4 criteria. It feels out of control. People try to stop, but they can't stay stopped. And it brings with it harmful consequences. Those are the first 3 criteria. I'm not sure how useful those are, because good sex is out of control. You know, you have to lose yourself in the sexual experience. Sex is hard to stop because it's built in. I mean, we're all mandated to be sexual on some kind of regular basis. And it can also bring an ongoing and wholesome sex life. Can bring many benefits. We read about this in the paper, that couples that stay together, have a living relationship, which I would assume means some kind of intimacy. They live longer, have happier lives. The one that I find most important in trying to establish compulsive sexual behavior is the last one, and that is the behavior has a function. It's doing something. And I do a thing on the board, and I will point out it's either dealing with depression, anxiety, stress, loneliness, or shame, or simply boredom, because some people are more boredom prone than others. Pascal said all the trouble in the world comes about because we can't sit in our room alone. That's very, very clear, very, very important. And so what the sexual behavior is, let's say the internet, and the internet particularly, is simply a temporary escape from bad feelings. The problem with that particular escape, it usually creates more bad feelings, which means more escape, more bad feelings, more escape, and so you get a vortex going down. In many ways, it's not really about the internet or the sex. It's about the precursor: loneliness, shame, anxiety, stress. In every group, we have a small number of men who act out on loneliness, another group that act out on stress, another group who act out on shame. Act out's the term I use. The thing that underlies addiction is in the family of origin, there has never been a downloading of other self-soothing techniques. And so people then reach out for the bottle or reach out for the internet as a way of self-soothing. In other words, I'm just going to use the word healthy self-soothing, is learned. I mean, you can see it on the street. You see a mother putting a hat on a thing on a child. She's regulating his body temperature. Well, we need to also, we learn how to regulate our feeling states. And in the group, we have an excellent group running at the moment. We have 4 groups running, but this is a one night. We have 8 people in this group. But it was very interesting that they had all come to a common mind as to what was triggering the addictive process. One person was very aware that it was triggered by alcohol being the gateway, because in the neuroscience of the whole thing, alcohol as well as arousal chemistry shuts down the cognitive part of the brain. It's not that you lose your moral compass, you can't access it. I mean, that's what happened to Bill Clinton. I mean, that was crazy. Or even sadder was Stephen Green. You may not remember Stephen Green. He was the director of public prosecution in the 1970s, and he was arrested curb crawling at King's Cross. I mean, this is insane. The director of public prosecution curb crawling. Well, the arousal chemistry had shut down his capacity to consider consequences. Of course, he lost his whole career, and his wife committed suicide. So, you know, there are extraordinary implications and ramifications in this whole business.